What if I told you that the one thing that sends most fishermen back to their warm beds is actually a dinner bell for the biggest fish in the lake? We're talking about that first real frost of the season, that crisp, white coating on the grass and the boat ramp. Today we're going to tear down that old myth that a frosty morning means a dead bite. In fact, I'm going to show you why it might just be one of the best times to be on the water. There's a reason so many anglers struggle on these days, and it has nothing to do with the fish not wanting to eat. So let me ask you right now, is frost a fish killer or a fish trigger? Drop your answer in the comments before we even get started. I want to see where you all stand on this. Every year, like clockwork, the same conversation happens at bait shops and online forums. The first frost hits, and the consensus is clear. The bite is going to be tough, better wait for it to warm up. This idea is practically baked into fishing culture. Our grandfathers told us, our buddies tell us, that a sudden cold snap and frost shuts the fish down completely. So what do? We sleep in, we wait for that midday sun, we waste the most important hours of the day, all based on an idea that's, frankly, incomplete. It's easy to believe because it feels right, it's cold for us, so we assume it's cold for them and they get sluggish. We've all had those tough days after a cold front. But we're confusing the front with the frost, and that's the critical mistake we're here to fix. First, let's tackle the biggest myth head-on, the idea of initial shock. Many anglers believe that the first frosty air temperatures will instantly stun a base, making it lethargic and unwilling to feed. But we have to remember that a base is a cold-blooded creature. Its body temperature and metabolism are regulated by the water around it, not the air. While a prolonged, drastic drop in water temperature can slow them down, a single frosty morning is just a blip on the radar for the water column. Think of it this way: you might need a jacket to walk to the boat ramp, but the fish are still swimming in water that has been holding a relatively stable temperature for weeks. They are not in shock. In fact, they are often at their peak efficiency for the season, ready to capitalize on any opportunity. This leads us to the most critical concept to understand: water's incredible insulating power. Water has a very high specific heat. That's a scientific way of saying it takes a massive amount of energy to change its temperature. Unlike the air, which can swing 20 or 30 degrees overnight, the water, especially a few feet below the surface, barely notices a single frosty morning. The surface temperature might drop a degree or two, but the overall environment for the fish remains stable. So when you see frost on the ground, don't imagine the lake as an ice cube. Instead, picture it as a well-insulated cooler, protecting its inhabitants from the drastic, fleeting changes happening in the air above. This stability is key to understanding why fish remain active. So if the base aren't shocked, what is? The answer is the key to this entire puzzle: the bait fish. Small forage fish like shad and minnows are far more susceptible to sudden temperature changes. That thin layer of surface water that cools down overnight is exactly where they often live. The sudden cold snap, even if it's minor, can be a genuine shock to their system. This makes them sluggish, disoriented, and vulnerable. They start to move erratically. They might flutter or die off. For the predators lurking below, this is the equivalent of a free buffet suddenly opening for business. The frost doesn't shut the bite down. It triggers the entire food chain into action by weakening the very first link. Now let's think like a predator. Bass, pike, and other game fish are hardwired for one thing: energy efficiency. They are programmed to find the easiest possible meal. A healthy, alert school of shad is difficult to hunt. It requires a lot of energy to chase them down, but a school of cold-shocked, slow-moving, or dying shad, that's a low-energy, high-reward meal. It's the opportunity they've been waiting for all year. A frosty morning is a signal for them to go on the offensive. They know their prey is weak. This is not a time for them to be sluggish and hiding. It is the prime time for them to be actively hunting, taking advantage of the vulnerability of their food source. It's pure, instinctual opportunism at its finest. To understand where this feeding happens, we need to talk about the thermocline. During the summer, most lakes stratify into layers. You have a warm, oxygen-rich layer on top and a cold, oxygen-poor layer on the bottom, with a sharp transition zone called the thermocline in between. Fish are often locked into that top layer. But as fall progresses and the air cools, the surface water cools down, becomes denser, and sinks. This process begins to break down that thermocline. A frosty morning is a major sign that this process, known as the fall turnover, is either in full swing or has recently completed. This is a massive change in the underwater world. It's like the walls of their house have just been knocked down. The fall turnover is a game changer. As that stratification breaks down, the water mixes. Oxygen is redistributed throughout the entire water column. Suddenly, fish are no longer confined to that upper layer near the thermocline. They are free to roam anywhere in the lake, from the shallowest banks to the deepest holes, in search of food. The frost you see on your truck's windshield is a direct, visible confirmation of this massive underwater event. It signals that the lake's environment has fundamentally changed. The fish are not hunkered down. They are on the move, exploring their newly opened territory, and most importantly, actively searching for those big schools of bait. With the turnover complete and the fish on the move, the question becomes, where do they go? The answer is simple and logical. They follow the food. And what are the now vulnerable baitfish looking for? Comfort. They are seeking out the warmest available water they can find to escape the cold shock. They need to find any small area that can offer them a degree or two of relief. This quest for warmth concentrates massive schools of baitfish into very specific, predictable locations. Your job as an angler is no longer a guessing game of covering vast amounts of water. Your job is to identify these small, warm water sanctuaries, because where you find the bait, you will absolutely find the base. So where is this warmest available water on a frosty morning? The number one clue is any kind of hard cover that absorbs solar radiation. Think about dark-colored rocks, riprap banks, concrete seawalls, and boat ramps. These materials spend all day absorbing heat from the sun. Overnight, while the surrounding ground and sand radiate that heat away quickly, these dense materials retain it for much longer. They slowly bleed that stored warmth into the water around them, creating a microclimate that can be several degrees warmer than the rest of the shallows. For a cold-shocked shad, this is a life-saving oasis. For a base, it's a conveniently prepackaged lunch counter. Let's use a very specific, visual example that every fisherman has seen: the concrete boat ramp. It sits in the sun all day, soaking up heat. As the frosty night sets in, that concrete continues to radiate a small amount of warmth into the water directly adjacent to it. This subtle temperature difference is a massive beacon for baitfish. They will stack up right against it. It's one of the most overlooked and productive spots on a cold morning. Next time you launch your boat when there's frost on the ground, take a moment. Make a few casts parallel to the ramp before you even head out to your main spot. The results might just shock you. It's a perfect illustration of how fish use these man-made, heat-retaining structures. Now let's compare different types of cover. Wood is good, but on a frosty morning, rock is almost always better. Submerged logs, laydowns, and old docks can certainly hold fish, but wood does not absorb and retain solar heat nearly as effectively as dark rock or concrete. On these specific mornings, you need to prioritize your targets. A sun-drenched granite bluff or a man-made riprap causeway is a 5-star hotel for baitfish. A shady, submerged log is more like a 1-star motel. By focusing your efforts on these heat-retaining hard targets first, you drastically increase your odds of finding a concentrated population of both bait and the base that are there to eat them. It's about fishing smarter, not harder. A common mistake many anglers make on cold mornings is thinking the fish have all moved to the deepest water in the lake. They start dredging the main lake basin with slow-moving baits, assuming the fish are deep and sluggish. While some fish certainly are deep, the most aggressive and catchable fish are often doing the exact opposite. They are pushing up remarkably shallow right against those rocky banks and seawalls to ambush the bait that has gathered there. It's a feeding frenzy happening in 2 to 6 feet of water, while most boats are 100 yards away, fishing in 30 feet. The frost doesn't push them deep, it pulls them shallow to where the easy meals are located. This brings us to your lure choice and another critical mistake. The old school wisdom says cold water, slow presentation. So anglers tie on a jig or a shaky head and start slowly dragging it on the bottom. While this can work, it often fails to capitalize on the fish's actual mood. These baits are not lethargic, they are actively hunting, keying in on the erratic, dying movements of shocked baitfish. Your lure needs to match that. This is the time for reaction baits. You don't want to slowly introduce yourself, you want to surprise them, to trigger that predatory instinctual strike. Your lure should look like a panicked, easy meal, not a slow, crawling crawfish. So what are the best reaction baits for a frosty morning? Number 1 on the list is often a jerkbait. Its erratic, slash-and-pause action is the perfect imitation of a dying shad. Number 2 is a lipless crankbait. You can burn it over shallow flats near those rocky banks and get bone-jarring strikes. A tight-wobbling, flat-sided crankbait is another excellent choice, as is a simple spinnerbait. The key element all these lures share is the ability to generate a reaction. The fish doesn't have time to inspect it or think about it. It sees a flash, feels a vibration that signals a struggling meal, and it attacks out of pure instinct. This is how you catch the most aggressive fish in the school. Let's quickly touch on color selection for these baits. On these frosty post-frontal mornings, the weather is often very stable and the skies are clear. This usually means the water clarity is good. In these conditions, you want your lure to look as natural as possible. This isn't the time for loud, obnoxious chartreuse or fire tiger patterns. Think about what the baitfish actually look like. Shad patterns, chrome, bone, and ghost minnow are all excellent choices. You want a lure that catches the fish's eye with its action, not its unrealistic color. The goal is to perfectly mimic that vulnerable forage they are already dialed in on. With reaction baits, the cadence is everything. It's not just about reeling it in. Think about how a dying baitfish moves. It's not a steady retrieve. For a jerk bait, the classic jerk, jerk, pause is deadly. The pause is often when the strike comes, as the lure sits there, perfectly suspended and helpless. For a lipless crankbait, try a yo-yo retrieve. Burn it a few feet, then kill it and let it flutter down on a semi-slack line. That flutter mimics a dying shad perfectly. By varying your retrieve and incorporating these pauses and changes in direction, you are speaking the language of a vulnerable meal. This is what separates a good day from an unforgettable one. So what about those slow-moving baits like jigs and soft plastics? Do they have a place? Absolutely. They are your cleanup hitters. After you've worked an area over with a reaction bait and picked off the most aggressive, active fish, that's the time to switch. You can go back through that same area with a jig or a drop shot. This allows you to slowly and methodically target any less aggressive fish that might still be holding on that same rock, pile or point. But leading with the slow stuff is often a mistake. Use the reaction baits to find the fish and catch the easy ones first, then use the finesse tactics to mop up the rest. It's also important to understand the timing of this bite. The magic window is often the first 1 to 3 hours after sunrise. This is when the air temperature is at its lowest, but the predatory instinct of the base is at its highest. They are taking advantage of that low light and the still sluggish baitfish. As the sun gets higher and begins to warm the shallows, the baitfish can recover. They become more active and alert, and they often disperse. The bite can slow down considerably. That's why sleeping in is the biggest mistake. You are literally missing the best part of the day, waiting for conditions to get more comfortable when the fish were most active when it was uncomfortable. Let's paint a quick picture of a real-life scenario. Imagine you're the only truck at the boat ramp. The frost is so thick it crunches under your boots. Your rod guides are icing up on every cast. It feels miserable. Everyone else is at home, drinking coffee. You make a long cast with a jerkbait, parallel to a sun-facing rocky bank. You give it 2 sharp snaps and then you pause. On that pause, you feel a heavy thump and your line goes tight. The rod doubles over with the weight of a heavy cold water base. That is the moment. That is the feeling that every other angler is missing because they believed the old lie. It's a bite born out of opportunity, not desperation. Ultimately, this all comes down to a fundamental mindset shift. You have to stop thinking that frost is your enemy. It's not an obstacle to be endured. It's a signal to be exploited. It is a giant flashing neon sign that says, the buffet is open. When you learn to see that white coating on the ground not as a sign of a tough bite, but as a confirmation that the food chain is primed for action, your entire approach to fall and winter fishing will change. You will start looking forward to these days with anticipation, knowing you have a distinct advantage over every angler who chose to stay home. So let's put this all together. The frost on the ground isn't a stop sign. It's a giant, flashing green light. It tells you that the water is finally getting cold enough to stun the baitfish, and the predators are taking full advantage. While everyone else is hitting the snooze button, believing that old myth about a dead bite, the fish are actively feeding. The biggest takeaway here is this: stop thinking about how the cold affects you and start thinking about how it affects the bait. The bass don't care about the frost on your windshield. They care about an easy meal, and that frosty morning creates the easiest meal they'll have all season. This single shift in perspective can turn a season you thought was ending into one of the most exciting times to fish. You're no longer avoiding these days, you're seeking them out. You'll have less competition on the water and a real strategic advantage. Thank you for watching and for being willing to challenge some old school thinking with me. If this video gave you a new perspective, do me a favor and hit that like button. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next video where we break another fishing myth. Now I have to ask, what is the single biggest fishing myth your grandpa or an old-timer ever told you? Let's hear the best ones down in the comments. I bet we've all heard some wild ones. Stay warm out there and go catch 'em.